It's the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on Better Sports Network.
You are looking live at the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show for June 8th, 2023. 7 o'clock in the p.m. means it's time to talk High Stakes Fantasy Football right here on the Better Sports Network. I'm your host, Eric Balkman, at Eric Balkman on Twitter, from the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, the FFPC, the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown as well. Want to welcome in my guest co-host tonight, a gentleman who's been around in the industry for well over a half decade, who is looks at it from a very analytical, value, data-driven standpoint, which we appreciate. You follow him on Twitter, I'm sure already, at peakedinhs_FF, the DraftSharks Product Manager himself, Alex Korff. Alex, welcome in. Happy June to you.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I just learned it's June 8th. I actually didn't know that, so that's I really thought it was earlier. It's going fast, man.
That's the thing. It's like, because you are so deep into everything you're doing right now. It's just like from now until week one, it's a blur for you guys.
Yeah. It's funny. My fan, I told him like I was starting this job, and they're like, "Oh, it's the off season. What are you going to do? It's February." And I'm like, "No, you don't understand. I am literally more busy February through July than I will personally be in season. The other guys will be more busy, but that's not what I do, really."
Right. Right.
It's like I got plenty.
You're in the thick of it, which is great, because now we can all learn from you here for the next 2 hours tonight. And I do want to let everybody know that on the show tonight, we'll obviously in segment number one, we're going to get to all the stuff around the NFL, Dalvin Cook, DeAndre Hopkins. We'll get into some Marquise Brown in the Bears backfield as well. And then I want to get into, at the bottom of the hour, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the underrated and overrated players in the FFPC tournaments, according to Alex right now. Some quarterbacks, some running backs, receivers, and tight ends I'm going to ask him about. Then to kick off hour number two, we're going to talk about the Dynasty trade value charts that Alex puts out for DraftSharks and how you can use them to your advantage in your Dynasty leagues. And then we'll actually give you some real-life examples, including Deshaun Watson, Cooper Kupp, and more. And then the last part I want to talk about at the last bottom of the second hour, we'll get into some redraft rookie values. We've been talking about these rookies so much from a Dynasty standpoint. You know, we're in the thick of everything drafting season now. I think it's important that we look at the impact that these rookies are going to have on your annual, draft leagues, your annual redraft leagues. So we'll get into that as well. I want to remind everybody, in case you are wondering, hey, Alex and Balky, where can I put all your great analysis to good use in fantasy football leagues this year? Well, look no further than myffpc.com, where you can win $1 million in the inaugural Fantasy Pros Championship, just $350 entry at myffpc.com. If you register by June 15th and draft by June 30th, you'll get a free $35 league credit. And you can do that up to 3 times, which by my math is over $100 in free FFPC leagues at myffpc.com. We'll have plenty of Dynasty startups going on all summer. myffpc.com is where to go for that. They start at $100. They go all the way up to $5,000. So whatever your price point is, whatever your format is, Superflex, Best Ball, Classic, whatever, we have the Dynasty League for you. We've been doing Dynasty for well over a decade. 1,300 plus leagues, never has one folded. So this is your place for Dynasty Fantasy Football. The FFPC main event, obviously off and running in a little bit more than a month here with slow drafts. Register for that right now. You can win $1 million in the main event, become the next FFPC millionaire. If you don't want to wait to draft, you can draft right now at myffpc.com. The FFPC Best Ball Tournament, $125 to enter that, and you can win a $200,000 grand prize. If you want to play in the Superflex Best Ball Tournament with myffpc.com, $35 to enter, and you can still win a $50,000 grand prize. If you don't want to jump in the tournaments, that's okay. You want to try out something that's just a closed 12-team league, we got plenty of those as well, and those start at just $5. Shout out, and that's all at myffpc.com. Shout out to Anthony Rivera, our producer, the man behind the glass tonight. Let's get into it, Alex. Dalvin Cook, according to Tom Pelissero, is expected to be released by the Minnesota Vikings tomorrow, unless they can find a trade. Let's face it, they're not going to find a trade partner tonight. Andrew Cooper, our very own Andrew Cooper, Coop from Fantasy Alarm, had a great article on this, kind of digesting all the angles here. And I guess the thing I want to talk a little bit about for fantasy purposes, Alex, I don't know how you feel let's not talk about Dalvin Cook's next landing spot yet. Let's talk about the guys that are still going to be in Minnesota. They gave Alexander Mattison that 2-year contract. They expect him to be the starter. I know a lot of people, and I don't know what you thought about Ty Chandler when he got picked up by the Vikings last year. There's a lot of people that are very excited about him. And then DeWayne McBride, a guy that they drafted in the NFL draft this past year. I know a lot of people thought he was going to go earlier than he did. He did not. It's kind of an interesting backfield right now. How do you make sense of this for fantasy? Do you have any favorites there?
So it's almost like you were in our group chat at work today where I was aggressively fighting Matt about Ty Chandler versus DeWayne McBride. So I kind of like both of them, but I am this year I finally was able to publish the results of my rookie prospect model. And I have an article about it. But one of the things I look at that is very important is actual like draft capital, NFL draft capital. I quantify it, and that is a metric that we look at. It's draft capital versus I aggregate film scores, normalize them, and then weigh them depending on how they've been successful in the past. I also look at athleticism and then at just production, right? 4 things, reasonably simple. Each of them is a little different, but I can sort it that way. But when you look at it, DeWayne McBride had the highest difference between his draft capital score and his analytic profile of any running back that I've in the model. Full stop. Like it's the most. So where he got drafted was very surprising. I mean, I was projecting him to be more like not a second rounder, right? Like it's like 4th round. So I was surprised to see him go in the 7th. I mean, even on top of that, PFF had him as the 3rd highest running back rated since 2021. 16th highest graded by Zerline over on NFL.com. Like he had the 6th highest aggregate RB score, film score, and that's ahead of Breece Hall. So like of all, yes, exactly. So I'm not saying he's better than Breece Hall, but like looking at it, he was the 9th most productive RB. Like I'm not saying that he's going to be great. I'm saying he's very interesting, and I haven't left many rookie drafts without him in the 4th round, right? Like 3rd, 4th round. So I like him. I like his shot. Alexander Madison's still the dude, probably. Like more than likely it's Alexander Madison. More than likely it doesn't matter Ty Chandler or McBride, but it's fun.
And Coop also references in his fantasy alarm piece, Kenny Agwangu, who was their sort of special teams maven. Does he factor into this at all? He is not being drafted at all in the FFPC Fantasy Pros Championship.
So he's really, really fun if you have a league or any format that gives you return yards, right? Or I mean, and the dude's just electric. But he had like 5 touches not on special teams or something last year. I mean, it maybe have been more than that, but it was effectively nothing when I looked. I think maybe there's a chance he gets more involved, but no, I expect that. I mean, I don't know. In your last round, you could probably do worse.
Yeah.
I mean,
I guess you probably could do worse, but running back 25 is where Alexander Madison's going right now in the Fantasy Pros Championship, 607. He is sandwiched between Rachaad White and Isaiah Pacheco. I would imagine when the news goes final and official tomorrow, you're going to see Madison get a weekend bump in these drafts as far as, maybe being a top 20 guy. The other 2 guys, and you'd mentioned McBride, he's actually going running back 70 right now, I think, right? Running back 70. Do I have that right here as I look at my handy dandy, my trusty ADP? Running back 70. One of them is running back 70. One is running back 76 right now in drafts. So 70 is DeWayne McBride. Running back 76 is Ty Chandler. McBride is a 17th round pick. Ty Chandler is an 18th round pick. So it's kind of pick your poison. Alex would tell you to take McBride there. Although Chandler, I know there's a lot of Matt Shelf, like you just mentioned from DraftSharks, likes Chandler better there as well. Let's get into Dalvin Cook here. This is a player that I think he still has good football left in the tank. And obviously there's a lot of landing spots that he could go to. I won't cite all the landing spots that Coop writes here in this article. You can go to fantasyalarm.com to check it out. But a couple of them, and maybe the most popular one, the Miami Dolphins. We're going to talk about Devin Achane coming up later on in the show. But I do want to talk about if Dalvin Cook went to the Dolphins, he gets paired up with Mike McDaniel there, who loves his speed running backs. And obviously the system would fit Cook well. It's not like they have world beaters in there right now. I mean, obviously they drafted Achane, but Jeff Wilson, Raheem Mostert, okay. But Dalvin Cook is like a capital letter running back right there. If he goes in, if he goes to Miami, how high should we be looking at taking him in drafts? Could he, I know he could finish as a top 10 running back in that system. Does he finish as a top 10 running back in Miami, assuming health?
Can you assume health?
Yeah, that's a good point.
So assuming health, I mean, top 10s, top 10, top 12s, that's tough. Like I would expect, just kind of going off looking at, I have our projection based ranks. I mean, open on our site. Jared's the one that puts all those together. Dude's a genius. I'm not going to fight him on that. But I would expect, looking at it, he would maybe, I mean, like if he goes to Miami, the problem is, I mean, it's Jeff Wilson's still there. Mostert's still there. Chain's still there. What percentage of the backfield would you project Cook to have between those? I mean, and even Gaskin's still technically on the team. I think they re-signed, is it Laird? Laird? That, I think he's back too. Everyone's back. Yeah. So are they going to run 7 wide receiver or 7 running backs out there? I mean, like, how do you split it? It's hard to imagine that he would get top 10 or top 12 just with the backfield share that I think you would have to project him to have. I mean, it's possible, but I don't think that would be anywhere near I would draft him.
I think you make a good point too with Cook. Like, he's the type of player, if he does go to Miami, everybody will be super excited about drafting him. And then as the summer goes on, we'll kind of see the bell curve come down and his ADP will go down. And people realize, oh, wait a minute. How is this going to work that he's going to have this Bafo fantasy season for me as long as all those other guys are there? Now, running backs get hurt. Obviously, Mostert, Wilson, Cook, these guys have all been prone to injury over the years. But you can only keep a certain amount of running backs on the team. It'll be interesting to see who makes it and who doesn't. Miami. The Better Boss chiming in right now. He lists a team that is not in Coop's article. What about the Kansas City Chiefs? What about the Kansas City Chiefs? Let's just say, let's give him Dalvin Cook. Let's give him DeAndre Hopkins. Let's just give him another Super Bowl, right? Because that's basically what would happen. I don't want him to go to the Chiefs for a couple of reasons. Number one, I have Isaiah Pacheco in way too many dynasty leagues. They still have Clyde Edwards-Helaire there too, and then they re-signed Jerick McKinnon. This is another situation where we get very excited if you was to go to Kansas City, Alex. But then when we sit down and look at it, like, oh, there's maybe not a whole lot of path to fantasy goodness here for Dalvin Cook in Kansas City.
Yeah, I think it's the same story where not necessarily the same because they're different pieces versus Miami. But I mean, CEH is one of the guys that I'm leaving at every 18th round with. Like, I mean, his ADP I think is like, I mean, it's like 170. I mean, it's late. It's I might have my highest exposure of anyone might be to CEH. And if Dalvin Cook goes there, I'll just start all over, I guess. I don't know.
Edwards-Helaire, running back 63 in the Fantasy Pros Championship. He is 1506 right now. He's right behind Israel Abanikanda and Kenneth Gainwell. By the way, Mile High Luke is checking in right now. He also says, getting ready to draft number 1 of 3, the 350 teams this weekend, assuming the Fantasy Pros Championship he's talking about. Love the insight you guys have provided for years. Mile High Luke, we appreciate you. We'll do our best to offer some more insight tonight. The last team, and there's several teams on here that I want to bring up. The last team, I think, is a little bit different than what Miami and Kansas City would provide here for Dalvin Cook. Less or more headaches in those situations. But if he goes to Denver, what about that? The Broncos have cut some running backs recently. They have Javonte Williams recovering from that nasty knee injury early in the 2022 season. And it's sort of been Samaje Perine. They've been talking him up. I'm excited for him. For the dynasty teams, I could fire him up in. It basically costs nothing. And it seems like he's being drafted. And I'll tell you right now, in the Fantasy Pros Championship, he's being drafted as running back 31 at the 807, Alex. Almost seems like high stakes players are just assuming Denver is going to add somebody. If they were to add Dalvin Cook, now all of a sudden we can kind of see a path where he can be achieving a really good fantasy year for players.
I mean, I could see, but Cook would, let's say Williams starts on the pup, which we don't know, but it's the trajectory seems likely very similar to Dobbins the last year. Yeah, man, was it 2 years ago? No, it was last year. Things are moving. So Cook would be very exciting for the first 6-8 weeks or so, but then it starts being very, very split again, right? Williams they're probably going to bring back slowly, but then do you want to start off that strong and then peter out at the end, or do you want kind of more like how do you want it? What kind of projection do you want? And how do you want to build your team? So, and is Chase Edmonds still on the Broncos? Right,
Tampa. He's in Tampa now.
Oh, he's Tampa now. Yeah, you're right. They did come. All right. Not that he matters that much, but
right. But well, I mean, but he would have had an impact there, obviously, especially with his pass catching acumen. This is another guy too. I'm in these rookie free agent dynasty drafts right now with the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship, and I find myself drafting Chase Edmonds because I mean there's like 10 rounds of rookie picks, and I find myself drafting Chase Edmonds a lot because I don't know what's going to happen in Tampa. It's like, we've heard this old adage too, like any running back on any NFL team would make sense there because it is such a violent position, and these guys will end up getting production if they get the opportunity. The last thing I will mention here for the futures betting odds for Dalvin Cook's next team, Adam Thompson from Bookies actually put out hypothetical odds. I just want to get your take on this. The three main, there's four. No, there's three. There's three main favorites: the Jets, the Dolphins, the Cowboys. Those are the three favorites. The field obviously in there as well. And then you get into the Bears, the Cardinals, the Bills, the Broncos. Where would the best landing spot for him be? I mean, and I won't even limit it to these teams, Alex. Is there a spot that you are hoping he goes to if you have some Dalvin Cook already on your teams? What's the best spot in the NFL for him to go to that we as Dalvin Cook stats owners should be rooting for him to sign with?
I think the Cowboys would be a really interesting spot. Terrible. I mean, I don't even know that it would be that bad for Pollard. Pollard's never been the lead guy. I think that a split field there with Malik Davis and Deuce Vaughn, who is much smaller than most people that are playing the running back position, right? Like, I think the Cowboys would be a really interesting spot. And that's if I don't think it's legal in the state that I'm in, would bet, but that's the one that I would actually probably bet on. I think that it kind of just fits, right? It just makes sense. They want to run the ball. They have it often on offensive line when it's healthy. I mean, just like I guess every team, but I think they would be particularly interesting. And you're not going to get what you got out of the Vikings, Dalvin Cook, and we probably never will. And I mean, I don't know of any team in the league where you would get he is the guy anymore. But I also think the Chargers is another interesting one that's not even on that list.
Yeah, no, it's not.
Which is surprising to me. I feel like Eckler's great, but I mean, they've been trying to find the Melvin Gordon replacement for the last 2-3 years that he's been gone, and Joshua Kelly's fine, Isaiah Spiller's fine. Was it Roundtree's fine? Like, you can get someone real in there. I think Cook would be very interesting there as well.
You can read Coop's full write-up, fantasyalarm.com, on the Dalvin Cook fallout if he does indeed get moved off that Vikings roster tomorrow, as Tom Pelissero from NFL.com reported. And as we gave you those odds, remember, if you're thinking of betting, the best places to go are the places you get hooked up with here at Better Sports Network. FanDuel, up to $2,500, no sweat first bet. FantasyAlarm.com/FanDuel. Deposit $10 or more. First bet up to $2,500. Get $2,500 in bonus bets back if you lose. DraftKings, if you bet $5, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. FantasyAlarm.com/DraftKings. BetMGM.com, $1,000 paid back in bonus bets if you don't win. FantasyAlarm.com/BetMGM. Caesars, up to $1,250 back on your first bet, plus 1,000 tier credits, 1,000 reward credits using promo code FULLFA. That's FULLFA. FantasyAlarm.com/Caesars. And don't forget about Prize Picks. FantasyAlarm.com/Prize Picks. Deposit match up to $100 if you use the promo code ALARM. $1 million Superflex every day of the NBA Finals. Make sure you're checking that out. Remember, FantasyAlarm.com is your home for all of those to get hooked up at all of those sites for all of your betting needs. All right, let's move on and talk about DeAndre Hopkins. He's sort of been in the news. This is a player that got released, I think, a week ago today, if I remember correctly, or it was a week ago tomorrow. Might have been a week ago tomorrow. But he's been a free agent. The only thing I've seen reported that he has visited has been the Tennessee Titans, which I know Treylon Burks people are hoping that he doesn't sign there because he becomes the automatic target monster if he goes there. There's a lot of other places that have been rumored. You think about Cleveland, New England, Kansas City, Buffalo. Those are all places that we have heard connected to DeAndre Hopkins. If you look at where he's being drafted, and this is the question here for you, Alex, he's being drafted as wide receiver 20 right now in the Fantasy Pros Championship at myffpc.com. 408 off the board. He is going after Amari Cooper, Keenan Allen, Calvin Ridley, Deebo Samuel, and then there's kind of a lull, and then about a half round after he goes, then you get into Jerry Jeudy and Christian Watson. How do you treat a guy as talented as Christian Watson in drafts right now, knowing that if you want to get him and he's not on an NFL team yet, you're going to have to soak a mid-4th round pick into it? Does that seem like something you'd want to do if you're trying to win $1 million and beat thousands of other teams, or are you looking elsewhere?
That's really tough. Like, I mean, you have to have some level of exposure, right? If you're doing it, because what if he does go to the Chiefs and he puts up, a wide receiver's top 6 finish? I mean, it's definitely possible, right? He has just, I mean, the guy has glue for hands, and he doesn't drop anything. He just is one of the better wide receivers in the league still, probably. But how many situations would he just not be as interesting as a top 20 wide receiver? That's rich. There's a lot of Jerry Jeudy, and you said Watson and Cooper, all right there. Like, that's maybe a little too rich for me. I probably won't have a ton of exposure to him at that price tag. But maybe now's the time, because where do you think, let's say he does sign with the Chiefs. He's 20 now. Where do you think he goes?
Well, at that point, I mean, like, regardless, when he signs, we know that high stakes players are going to give him the bump, because there's the assurance that he's going to be playing this year. Even if it's not a great situation, he's going to get a bump because he signed, he's officially with a team. If he signs with the Chiefs, dude, I mean, you're looking at him going past Samuel, past Ridley. I could see him going past Allen, Cooper, maybe Cooper. Then you're looking at like Metcalf. And I'll tell you this. I don't think if he signs with Kansas City, I don't think he will get higher than wide receiver 14, which is where T. Higgins is going right now. And T. Higgins is going at the 303. So if he signs with the Chiefs, I think the ceiling in where he goes in drafts would probably be the mid-3rd round as wide receiver 15. So he'll move up. I just don't know how much further you can move him up given his price tag already, which is something you alluded to.
So the counter to that is he signs with, who's the worst? The Texans, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, the Titans wouldn't be great either.
Titans, yeah. So he signs, or who has the most crowded? He signs with the Bengals, where they already have 2.
Oh yeah.
Where does he go? Does he stay at 20, or does he drop?
He's got to drop at that point.
He's got to drop, right?
Yeah.
So do we think that there's more equity in him moving, the potential for him to move up, or do you think there's more moving down? And that's the question. I expect that there's probably more situations where he's going to move down. But I mean, let's say he goes with the Bills. Does he stay? I mean, he stays at 20, right? Like,
if he was, because you still have Diggs there. Excuse me. I think that, because if he, I mean, I can't see him getting. Maybe he moves ahead of Ridley. I don't know. That's tough to say. But then you're looking at, if he falls, I mean, is he better than Jerry Jeudy in Denver? Maybe. Is he better than Christian Watson in Green Bay? I don't know. Potentially. I still like him better than DJ Moore in Chicago. I think you can make the case that he's better than Terry McLaurin and Drake London. So then at that case, I mean, it's wide receiver 23, wide receiver 24.
Yeah. So maybe he's just priced appropriately, and ADP is very good at their job.
Yeah. That's the thing. It's just like, people might be thinking they're when we break it down like this, you might be thinking if you're drafting him in the mid-4th round, you might be getting a deal on him right now. And I just, because of what you said, like, where he could go up or down, he's sort of the Goldilocks, just right. He's right in the middle right now.
So maybe what you have to do is you have to make a choice, right? If you think he's priced accordingly, you start drafting him now, but then you place bets on the teams that would drive his ADP down, that he would go there. That way you hedge.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
You can hedge that way. Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. You can use those promo codes and you can get that.
Yeah, absolutely. Go to FantasyAlarm.com/FanDuel/DraftKings/FGM/PrizePicks, all of them. So let's get into what Arizona, DeAndre Hopkins' former team in Arizona. I remember when Hopkins was suspended last year, Marquise Brown was putting up a lot of baller outings, and you were loving life if you had Marquise Brown. Then Hopkins came back, and I think there's this narrative out there that Hopkins wasn't very good when he came back off suspension last year, and that's wrong. I mean, he was very good. He put up 3 top 12 weeks, 2 top 24 weeks. Like he looked really, really good when he came back and put up the numbers. By the way, not always with Kyler Murray too. With Colt McCoy was doing it.
And Trace
McSorley, and that's another good
a made-up guy, I swear.
Yeah. I'm sure a lot of Cardinals fans thought he was a made-up quarterback until they actually saw him in action. Marquise Brown is right now wide receiver 34. he is going significantly lower than Hopkins. He is going at the 702 behind Pittman, Ayuk, Treylon Burks, and then you're looking at Marquise Brown. Is he poised for his best career season ever now that you know that Hopkins will not be on the team for the entirety of the season? And who's he fighting for targets? I mean, Michael Wilson from Stanford, Rondale Moore, who they drafted a couple years ago, and Greg Dortch. I mean, like he's the pedigree guy there. And wide receiver 34, Alex, seems too low for me. I'd be bumping him up.
Yeah, so we have him currently projected in PPR at wide receiver 29. And I think a lot of that's more based on, I know Jared is hedging that Kyler's probably not going to start the very first couple of games, which isn't even guaranteed because a timeline is reasonable for him to start week 1. I mean, he might start slow like, was it Burrow 2 years ago?
Yeah.
Who came back. And then there was another one recently where like they kind of come off slow, but was it Jimmy G maybe? It doesn't matter.
But then you have the flip side where Watson missed this time and he just never really put it together. Although he missed like a full year and plus, so I guess it's a little bit different. Yeah.
So I mean, there's a chance. I think he is one that I will probably be have more exposure to than others because I do think he's undervalued according to ADP for sure. Because what if right now people are projecting the Cardinals to have the number 1 overall pick? What if they just don't? I'm not saying that they're going to have then a good pick or a bad pick, right? Like they're going to be picking 24. But what if they're just a fine team, like they go 6-11 or something, and they're like fine, but then that's not baked into Marquise Brown's ADP. Like what if they aren't a complete and total train wreck? That's possible, and it's really not being baked in. We're just assuming they are just going to be the worst thing, maybe one of the worst NFL teams we've seen, and they definitely could be. But like even at his ADP, that's what you're buying. I think his upside is not being baked in.
No, it's not, and I think he will rise. I mean, as we get deeper into the season, people are going to realize, oh my God, Marquise Brown is the guy there. Why are we drafting him so low? And he won't be being drafted that low anymore. That the time is running out. I need to get Marquise Brown at wide receiver 34. Let's get into one more thing here before we take our first break. Courtney Cronin from ESPN, who covers the Chicago Bears, said that Khalil Herbert was getting first team reps at OTAs. This is not surprising. Herbert last year in a split backfield with David Montgomery still got 730 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns. He also had 57 yards receiving. I think that what's going to be compelling, and we always say this every year, Alex, with high stakes players, is like you got to get certain situations right, because we get certain situations right, it gives you a massive leg up on your competition. And I think getting this Bears running back situation, getting this right, is going to be paramount to people really achieving fantasy success, high levels of fantasy success, if they invest in a piece of this Bears backfield and it's the right piece. Deontay Foreman is not participating in OTA, so no surprise that Herbert would get the first team reps. But I know a lot of people who are talking about Rashawn Johnson even before the NFL draft, saying, like, look out for this guy. This guy is going to be a beast. And now he joins Herbert and Foreman in this backfield. Obviously, Herbert is going ahead of the other two. How do you see, and how does DraftSharks, more importantly, project this situation going? Is it kind of 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 between Herbert, Foreman, and Johnson? Or do you guys have somebody that maybe is a little bit ahead of the pack, that you're actually projecting for a bigger workload than the other two?
So right now they actually have 5 guys projected, which is disgusting. But I mean, but they do it based on how they broke it up last year. They have Tristan Ebner.
Oh yeah, Ebner. Yeah,
Travis Homer. But I mean, they are like one touch a week, but they're there. I was just surprised when I opened it up. But so they have Deontay Foreman well behind both Khalil Herbert and Rashawn Johnson for work. They have him about half the work compared to those guys, but they have a very even split between Herbert and Johnson. With it looks like a little bit of the hedging towards Khalil Herbert, especially in PPR. Mm-hmm. Not like a ton versus non-PPR, which is interesting because if I remember right, he had just terrible pass blocking, right? Or am I misremembering that?
No, I don't remember it being terrible, but I remember not being impressed by it at all.
Whereas that was one of Rashawn Johnson's calling cards. It's like the dude would sacrifice his life to protect the quarterback. And I think that's why Herms was all, I think he would have had him as his running back one if Bijan wasn't there. Like, he loves that guy. Every meeting it was, no, we can't put him that high. He was a 4th round pick. Like we no.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think, yeah.
Go ahead.
I would say any of them at the right price. If any of them, I think taking a shot on any of them is interesting. I've always had a soft spot for Foreman. It's been since 2017 that he's been burning me really until last year. He actually paid off last year in Carolina a little bit. And I think he has the potential to be fine in certain formats depending on what you want, but I'm not saying you have to go get him. I think they're all interesting. I'd probably lean Herbert as my favorite, but maybe the contrarian pick's the way to go.
Well, I'll tell you what's interesting about how they're being drafted right now in the Fantasy Pros Championship. You're looking at Khalil Herbert is a end of the 9th round pick as running back 38. The next guy is Roschon Johnson, running back 45. He's basically at the end of the 10th round. So you're looking at about a round separating those guys. And then Deontay Foreman goes in the early 12th as running back 48. So, but what's great about that is, like, if you were drafting any of these 3 guys, you might be getting you will be getting a starter on one of these guys as late as the 9th round. And I know there's going to be a lot of people will just add Herbert to their backfield, add Johnson to their backfield, and utilize them on those weeks that maybe Herbert is hurt or Johnson can't go or maybe Foreman's out or something like that. So you're not investing a lot into any of these guys. I haven't seen anybody planting their flag. Well, I take that back. I have seen people planting their flag on Roschon Johnson since he's been a Bear, but I haven't seen anybody else with Foreman or Herbert. It's going to be a situation we'll follow throughout the summer. Obviously, as we get closer to training camp, we'll gain more clarity on that. We hope we're going to give you a lot of clarity on a lot of other stuff that's still in store for you here tonight on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show. Coming up next, we are going to get into some underrated and overrated players in the FFPC tournaments, be it the Fantasy Pros, the Best Ball Tournament, what have you. We're going to get Alex's thoughts on whether you should be targeting these guys or letting somebody else take them. He's Alex Korff from DraftSharks.com. Follow him on Twitter at peakedinhs_FF. And check out all his work there as well as DraftSharks.com. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC. Don't go anywhere. The High Stakes Fantasy Football Show rolls on next here on the Better Sports Network.
The High Stakes Fantasy Football Show with Eric Balkman.
So let's get into some best ball philosophy here.
Yeah.
In your experience, going back many, many, many years, drafting in national tournaments, Bradley, have you historically been shying away from the running back position in favor of wide receivers? In favor of, if you're drafting in the FFPC tight end premium format, in favor of tight ends as well. Is that the smart play when you're drafting this early in the drafting season?
Yeah, so taking value is going to be huge, and looking at like running backs and wide receivers, like you want to take a look at how the structure is. So you mentioned earlier the FFPC has a couple different types, like they've got super flex and one quarterback, and so that's going to change your strategy a little bit if you have only 2 wide receivers or if you're drafting 3 wide receivers. And of course, the PPR is a different aspect compared to other formats or other tournaments. And so keeping in mind the pass catching upside of some of the running backs may be more valuable in those formats. So the Austin Ecklers, the Christian McCaffreys may be more value because they get more receptions, and so like I loved taking late shots a couple years ago on like the JD McKissicks of the world who would get 50 receptions really cheaply. So that's something to consider. But when it comes to like overall value, like you're drafting, you're in the middle of a draft, and you just noticed that, I don't know, maybe it's Chris Godwin has fallen 14 spots, but Chris Godwin was not in your plans to be drafting. Like maybe you don't have a strong player take on Chris Godwin, or my take is that I don't think the Bucs are going to be particularly good this year. But for him to be dropping, let's say 14 spots is more than a full round. And based on the data that we've seen, if you get to draft a player more than 12 spots ahead or behind ADP, so they drop 12 or more spots, you have an 84% edge over the rest of the tournament players who are drafting this player. Because typically this player isn't going to drop. the average draft position is a really strong indicator of where a player is going to go. And I think that is also on the flip side. If you are reaching too much, you're giving up value in your drafts. And so when it comes to value-based drafting, you need to consider, just because this guy is in my plans or I don't have a strong player take on him, maybe that's your opportunity to sprinkle in some shares of this player at a good price.
It's the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on Better Sports Network.
25 minutes until the top of the hour here on the Better Sports Network. This is the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show presented by the FFPC. I'm Eric Balkman from the HSFF Hour. The FFPC, the road of his High Stakes Lowdown, and joining me tonight as my guest co-host is Alex Korff from DraftSharks.com, the product manager over at DraftSharks.com. Remember, if you are looking for more insight besides what we give you right here live on the show, you can always get the Better Sports Network newsletter emailed to you every single day, including our daily Better Bet, exclusive offers, program alerts, special events, and top moments. Register for free right now at bettersports.com. I think it's always interesting as we say this on June 8th right now, to look at the ADP for some of the major tournaments. Well, and we'll focus on the Fantasy Pros tournament. It's the most popular one at the FFPC right now. This is a managed league. This is not best ball. You got to figure out who you're starting. You're switching out guys on waivers and fab every single week. But I wanted to get your thoughts on whether you think any of these guys are over or undervalued, Alex. And we'll start off with a quarterback that we kind of talked about in the first segment, and that's Kyler Murray. These are always difficult guys to figure out, right? Because he was going last year, and I should have brought it up where he went in the main event last year at the end, but it was up there. I mean, he was like a top 6, top 7 quarterback. And this year, because he's coming off the knee injury, he is going at quarterback 20 at the 15-12. He's kind of by himself. I mean, you're looking at Russell Wilson, Bryce Young going a full round before him, and then Derek Carr is basically going a half to a full round after him. There's nobody else in that territory. If this is a single quarterback league, he's being drafted as quarterback 20. Is this the type of guy that, maybe if you draft a Trevor Lawrence, a Dak Prescott, Anthony Richardson, Deshaun Watson, if you draft one of those guys, do you take Kyler Murray along with him and go to battle with those two quarterbacks? Is that how you handle Murray? How would you handle Murray? Is this the right spot for him to be going?
So it's amazing. We have Murray ranked exactly at 20, and I was looking at the guys around him, and I wouldn't move him. I think that's very reasonable. I think in a 1 QB league, that's not the type of like I wouldn't be pairing him with a highly drafted quarterback. But I think doing like Kyler Murray and then Derek Carr might be reasonable. Where let's say we're concerned about Murray the first 1 to 6 weeks of the season, where he might ramp up a little bit slowly. I want someone that I can absolutely rely on to start off, right? Somewhere that you can plug right in. It's probably not Anthony Richardson. It's probably not Deshaun Watson with how he ended the year, but maybe you just have to double down and say it is. So I think if you really punt the position, I think he gives you the upside of a top 6 if he gets healthy and the team isn't terrible. Top 6 is probably a little rich, but probably top 8 to 10. But I would want something safe in the meantime. So I wouldn't be looking at like Bryce Young or even Jordan Love. I would want someone Derek Carr, maybe Jimmy G if he's healthy. Maybe Tannehill, like that type of pairs is how I would go about it. Like one safe option and then shoot for the moon with Kyler Murray to come on later in the year. And then it also gives you the option to really have your wide receivers, your tight ends, and your running backs absolutely set by the time you're taking that quarterback.
Are you convinced, Alex, that, and I've heard this from people, there are some pundits out there that they're not sold on Murray playing at all this season, or at least the possibility of Murray playing it all this season because of, they're not expected to compete this year. They have a very good chance at the number 1 overall pick next year, when you consider that they have Houston's pick as well. When you take those factors in mind, how concerned are you that if you draft Murray, maybe he doesn't play at all in 2023?
I think at a QB 20 ADP where he was going in the, what'd you say, 10th round?
No, 15th.
Oh, see, like, okay, you lit a 15th round pick on fire, you'll be okay. Like in a 1 QB league, absolutely. Like, oh no, like what will I do? Like you'll survive, you'll be okay. I think that likelihood of him sitting out the entire year is incredibly low.
Okay.
People like to play football. Like, I think he wants to get paid, and unless he's playing or has an actual injury designation, right? Like, if you're just sitting out, you don't get paid, right? Like, that's kind of how it works. I would be shocked if he didn't play. But I mean, maybe he isn't on. Maybe they do have Caleb next year. Maybe he's on a different team. Who knows? That one's. We aren't talking about 2024.
Right. I think I look back at I can't remember when I found out about this. This is probably 2 or 3 weeks after the NFL draft, and somebody said to me, "Did you see the video of Mike McDaniel when they drafted Devin Achane?" And I said no, and I can't remember if NFL Network or ESPN had it. And I went back on Twitter and I looked at it. And Mike McDaniel's an interesting guy anyway, but to see him do that fist pump when they got Devin Achane, I'm like, okay, there's something here. And we've heard from a lot of people like, look, this is a marriage made in heaven with him and McDaniel in Miami, as long as Dalvin Cook doesn't come up and throw a monkey wrench into the plans. But Achane competing with Mostert and Jeff Wilson as of right now, running back 37. He is going in the 9th round, right behind A.J. Dillon and Brian Robinson, right ahead of Khalil Herbert, who we just talked about, and Rashad Penny. Running back 37, does that seem right? Because I look at that guy, and I don't think he has necessarily – he definitely has a set role. I just don't know how big that role is. And when you only have to start 2 running backs. You could start up to 4. When you're talking about a 9th round pick, I don't know if Achane is the right way to go, but maybe it's just because I don't have a handle on how the Dolphins are going to use him. What do you think, Alex, about Achane in the 9th round?
I don't think anyone has a handle on how the Dolphins. I don't think the coaches even know, right?
Hopefully, Mike McDaniel does. Outside of that, who knows? You're right.
So I think Jared tried to troll everyone with the projections. So he has Jeff Wilson, Raheem Mostert, and Devin Achane 40, 41, and 42 back to back to back. Within 10 points projection of each other. So I think he went and looked at it and went, I don't know.
Yep.
So when I see situations like this, I take whoever is the best value. And that has been so far for me. I've been ending up with Jeff Wilson or Mostert. I have both, and not a lot of Achane, to be honest. And especially in the 9th round, there's still like some guys that have a little clearer path to success where they don't like a higher likelihood, but you're paying for that uncertainty, or that uncertainty is what you're trying to get a value at. 9th round isn't that a crazy value though.
I would say Khalil Herbert, a guy we just talked about, I'd feel more comfortable drafting him than Achane. Although Achane obviously has a higher ceiling. Jamal Williams in New Orleans, given the stuff with Kamara, I think he's really interesting. Damian Harris now in Buffalo, I think you'd have to look at him as well. And then you get into the Tank Bigsby's and Roshan Johnsons of the world as far as ADP goes for the Fantasy Pros Championship. So it really, quite frankly, is like a pick to win type thing. Maybe he's a league winner, maybe he's not. But this is how FFPC players are drafting him right now. He's running back 37. You don't have to worry about another Dolphins running back going off the board until running back 52. That's Jeff Wilson. Wilson's 52. Mostert's 56. They are basically going 3.5 full rounds after Achane. And I think, Alex, you'd agree with me. There's no value in Achane there. The value is in those other 2 more boring running backs.
But, I mean, are they boring? Yeah, they're more boring. But boring's good.
They could be boring. Could be good because you're not looking for style points here. You're looking for points in general. And Wilson and Mostert could give that to you better than Achane could over the course of the season. It remains to be seen. I just mentioned Damian Harris, who left New England for Buffalo in free agency. The guy that everybody is really excited that the Bills did not invest a high round draft pick in the running back position there is James Cook, who is running back 30 at the 802. Now, he's going behind Connor. He's going behind David Montgomery and Javonte Williams. I think I might rather have Connor there.
Yeah.
But I think I would take Cook over Montgomery and Williams. And then he is going ahead officially, or on average, Samaje Perine, Zach Charbonnet, Alvin Kamara, Antonio Gibson, all after James Cook right now. What do you make of Cook, what you've seen from him, what he has done in the NFL so far? And how does that translate into what he's going to put out on the field and put in the stat column in 2023, Alex?
I think think that one's particularly interesting. I would absolutely take Connor over him. I think Connor is being slept on. But I think kind of just like the pulse of some of my leagues out there that my, your league mates that you talk to that you hang out with all the time, some of them checked out early on James Cook because he didn't start the year really anything at all. I mean, it was Singletary with the bulk of it. And then Cook had a couple games to the end of the season that really were like, oh yeah, okay, he's getting integrated. This is it. This is him. He had, he just had some great runs. And if he continues that, I'm really excited for him. What's interesting is that Jared actually has Damian Harris still projected for more points than James Cook. Full stop. Like he has Damian Harris at rank 29 and then Cook at 35. And those guys, I mean, they live in Rochester. They
dialed
hear
in.
Bill stuff. Yeah. They get pounded over the head with it. So especially when he starts talking about that makes it particularly interesting in Damian Harris out of that backfield versus Cook. I also might just ping him right now because I think he has Cook too low. But
so Damian Harris, I'm looking at running back 41. So if that's the case, if he's going at 41 at the 10:03, then all of a sudden Cook is like, what are we doing here? If we're letting the draft come to us, we can't be overdrafting James Cook 2 full rounds ahead of Damian Harris. I mean, if they're going to be close, and even if Cook was projected by more or for more by DraftSharks, I think the other thing you have to look at here is like look at the deep yawning chasm. 2 rounds is a big deal here, and I think if you look at it from that standpoint, Damian Harris looks a lot more attractive than James Cook. I do want to get back to something you said about James Conner because I think you and I are on the same wavelength with James Conner. I think people look at it and they say Arizona is going to be terrible this year. I'm not interested in drafting running backs on terrible teams. I'm not interested in drafting James Conner, who, if you look at his game logs over the course of his career, he definitely plays in a lot of games, but he leaves a lot of them hurt. And I think that has affected people and how they want to draft James Conner going forward. Why do we need to be bullish on James Conner, though, this year as running back 27 at the 702?
Yeah, I hate the phrase "who else is there," but who the heck else is there? Right?
Yeah,
like,
I mean it's guys. Everybody's got warts at that point, right? And you just got to kind of pick. I don't want to say pick your poison because some of these guys could be Gatorade. You never know.
Yeah. He has gotten the bulk of the work on that team. He can catch. I mean, he does everything we want, especially on a losing team. And there is always several running backs that are still very valuable on losing teams. Yes, we would prefer running backs on winning teams. Not every team can be a winning team. That's kind of how it works, right? So we just kind of have to pick our poison, swallow and then just take James Cook. We have him at 18. Like he's one of the guys that we're probably going to be very bullish on, and I know they've highlighted as one of their. He's going too early to be a sleeper because
right.
But like. He's sleeper adjacent, at least for us.
Sleeper adjacent, James Conner's new nickname. I love it. The sleeper adjacent, Arizona. Speaking of, now these guys in Washington could be true sleepers because this is I don't know when is the last time, Alex, I've had a good handle on the Washington offense. And this year it's even weirder with like Sam Howell and Jacoby Brissett. I kind of like some of the pieces there. I like McLaurin. I like Dotson there. In the backfield, we've heard some positive reports about Antonio Gibson. But I wanted to specifically ask you about Brian Robinson and how what we should be expecting from him. Now, you'll tell us where he's going or where DraftSharks has him projected at as far as running backs goes in a second. I can tell you right now, he is being drafted on average as running back 36 at the 906. It's between A.J. Dillon and Devin Achane. We've been talking about this area a lot in the draft tonight. He's another guy, a guy that had a weird start to last season after he was stabbed, obviously just bizarre circumstances. Yeah, or shot. Yeah, not stabbed.
Much worse.
I mix up my weapons of choice. So Robinson gets shot. He starts off the season slow. He starts off the season not playing. Then he gets in. It's kind of he never really set the world on fire. I don't know if anybody's really expecting him to. What's there to say about a full off season of work for him now competing against Antonio Gibson, a competition that I think he has the leg up in specifically over Gibson this year when it was kind of a question mark last year.
Yeah, I think they're both very interesting. And I think if you pick one, they have the potential to really and one of them actually takes over. Let's pretend like, it's not a 50-50 split or close, 55-45, whatever it was. If one takes over and does 70-30, that's a lot of value right there. That's a backfield that's really, really interesting. And I think taking a shot on it, especially in that round with the people around them, either Robinson or Gibson, I'm pretty excited to take either of them at their value, because they're ones that I didn't anticipate being excited about, but I think especially with where they have fallen and who they have around them, they're ones that I end up with a lot. And I usually lean towards the Gibson side just because I like pass catchers
Pass
or
catching.
natural pass.
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
But I mean, but maybe the contrarian play is Brian Robinson. Maybe it's taking a shot on him sometimes and then seeing what happens.
I'm actually surprised that they're as close in ADP. I mean, I just said Robinson running back 36, Gibson's running back 34. So it's basically Gibson, then Dillon, then Brian Robinson, then A-Chain. So they're very, very close in ADP. We're similar to what we're seeing in Miami, similar to what we're seeing in Chicago, and you can make the case Buffalo too. And I guess the thing is, like, and it's like you said, just take the guy who's going later and then hope for the best, at this point. Let's shift out of the backfield. Let's talk about wide receivers. Mike Evans is the guy I want to center on here. Mike Evans is a guy that we're all very excited when he got drafted out of Texas A&M and ended up putting up some really, really good years to start off his career. And then he gets Tom Brady as a quarterback, wins a Super Bowl. Now he is without Brady, he's without Winston. He's without a guy that really pumps the ball downfield quite a bit. And it might be a different looking offense in Tampa this year with either Kyle Trask or Baker Mayfield leading the way. And as a result, he has plummeted all the way to wide receiver 36. I rue the day I did not sell him in Dynasty at the end of last season, but it is what it is. Mike Evans, wide receiver 36. He's going behind Marquise Brown, Tyler Lockett, right ahead of Pickens and Smith and Jigba. So at that point, Mike Evans, 36, at the 7-10, I feel like everybody sees that and they're like, my God, why is he going so late? That's a screaming value. And then you back up the truck and you think, well, wait a minute. Is there a path for Mike Evans to really crush that ADP? I guess there is, but is it a wide path? I mean, what's the likelihood that Evans gets back to being a top 20 receiver this year? Clearly, the FFPC drafters don't have much faith in him.
And in any sort of managed league that I have to set my lineup and I have to pay attention. I mean, I'm never out on a player, but he might be one of the guys that I'm pretty close on. And that, yes, because I got aggressively burned by him last year. Because, I mean, even with Tom Brady last year, he wasn't startable most weeks. I mean, everyone started him, but you were very sad about it until he won your championship or cost you your championship last week and put up, 50 points or something between the two of them.
Yep.
I think he got like a third of his points in 1 week last year. I mean, he's tough because the position he plays, the value he adds to that offense. Do we think he's going to catch 8 touchdowns? Do we think he's going to catch 10 touchdowns? Probably not. He's one that's really tough. But when you're looking at him versus JSN or versus who else? You said Pickens.
George Pickens. Yep.
It seems reasonable level of. I mean, I would probably take him over Pickens just because I think. But maybe that's not the right choice. Now that I think about it, maybe you should double down on Pickett taking a step forward and the Steelers being better. That's more likely than Baker figuring it out or Trask being the answer.
Who would you rather have at this point? Because they're going back to back as far as wide receivers go. Mike Evans is well. I should let's take a step back. Who do you think the best wide receiver from a fantasy statistical standpoint will be at the end of the 2023 season? Is it going to be Evans or is it going to be Chris Godwin?
Oh, it's Godwin. I don't
like landslide, not close.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think he's going to have significantly more catches, and it's. I mean, I'm sure his yards per catch will be lower. He'll probably have a lower touchdown percentage rate, but probably end up maybe with the same. But I think the value he adds to that offense and the pieces that he fits, it's going to likely click a little bit more than Evans will.
And he is going. I mean, he's wide receiver 26. Evans is wide receiver 36. So which number 2 receiver? And I say number 2 because I don't know who the number 2 is going to be in Seattle. I think it's going to be Tyler Lockett. For the purposes of this question, we'll say it's Lockett. Would you take Mike Evans over Tyler Lockett because they're basically going at the same spot in drafts?
Man, that's tough with JSN. Like, it's how much do you think that rookie's going to be to come in and really matter?
I think I mean, you could make the case that Tampa has that number 3 receiver when you combine Rachaad White's pass catching ability and then what we sort of saw at the end of the season with Cade Otton. last year as well. And I don't know if one Otten and one White make up one JSN in Seattle. I don't know, but I think that's something to figure into it as well. I'm torn. I actually have. Now that I think about this, I have Evans and Lockett on the same Dynasty team, and I realize I'm probably going to have to trot both these guys out every week if I'm starting 4 receivers. So I probably need to do some work in that league to make sure that doesn't happen. But Lockett versus Evans this year in drafts, I mean, if you're drafting multiples, maybe you want to have pieces of both. But if you're only drafting one league, man, the upside of Evans is really intriguing. But Lockett has those spike weeks too. I don't know.
I think it's Lockett for me, and it's the more I think, I'm not sure that it's super close. I think it's an offense that we've seen be good. They added pieces this year that we're excited about, and not necessarily pieces that are going to take a ton of work away. I think there's going to be work taken away, but if the whole pie gets bigger because the offense is just better, I like Charbonnet. I like their ability to likely stay on the field and move the ball. And Geno's a much more exciting quarterback to me than Baker, the current iteration of Baker. Or maybe Kyle Trask is it. We'll see. I mean, I know a lot of people actually really liked him. Maybe he'll be interesting.
Baker Mayfield is going to be doing some soul searching if he loses that job to Kyle Trask. I'll tell you that right now. And I don't want him to. I think he's better for everybody else in that offense than Trask. But I haven't, full disclosure, it's not like I've seen all this Kyle Trask film. I'd like to see what happens in preseason with those guys. All right, so now another receiver. This is a guy, and I saw you tweeting about him, and Michael Thomas. When we talk about receivers that have been fantasy conundrums, guys that have been very polarizing. Anytime you have a guy who breaks the NFL record for most catches in the season and then has all these ankle and foot and leg injuries, it becomes very muddy in trying to project what he's going to do. With guys like this, Alex, I just sort of stay away in general. I did get a Dynasty offer it was a guy I was going to cut plus like a 3rd rounder next year, and I would be getting Michael Thomas. And I said, okay, at that price, I'll pick up Thomas and see what happens. So I have him on that Dynasty roster. As far as the Fantasy Pros championship goes right now, I believe he's wide receiver 47. If I am looking at this right, I went right past him. Michael Thomas, no, he's not wide receiver 47. He's wide receiver 43, going at the 8-11. So that is where he's going drafts after Cooks, after Gabe Davis, before Quentin Johnston, before Elijah Moore. Elijah Moore is another guy we should talk about too. Michael Thomas is wide receiver 43. Is that enough? Is that low enough for him to sucker you in and get you to draft him once again this season? Because I'm taking a long look at him at wide receiver 43 right now, my man.
He's tough. So going into this year, I had 100% exposure to Michael Thomas in Dynasty. What 100? Like there wasn't a single league. I was able to move a couple shares of him after his first 3 games where he looked like Michael Thomas, right? He looked fine.
Mm-hmm.
If he's back, if he is healthy and he stays healthy, 43 is the wrong price tag.
Right.
It just is, right? Like he will be a top 24 wide receiver. He just always has been. And maybe higher, I guess that's possible. Do we think he will be healthy and he is back and he is it? I don't know, man.
It's like that's why his ADP is up as high as it is. It's for the Michael Thomas believers that are taking him as like wide receiver 30 or wide receiver 28. Like Michael Thomas, baby, they got Derek Carr there now. Let's fire away. This is going to be great. And then there's other people that are just letting him drop, which is fine. I do not think he is going to be healthy all season. I do think he'll be healthy at certain points of the season. But then you take into the fact of like Jamal Williams can catch passes, right? Juwan Johnson's getting steamed up by high-stakes players right now. Kamara's still there. Some guy named Chris Olave, who had a fantastic rookie season last year. And then, by the way, they drafted A.T. Perry, who I've been reading a lot about lately, and it seems like the Saints really like him. So it's like at this point, I don't want to say wide receiver 43 is too rich, but man, a lot of things have to go his way. First of all, he's got to stay on the field, and second of all, he's still got to command some targets in that offense, which he will. Will it be enough to want to soak a pick in him in the 8th round over a guy like Gabe Davis, who is in one of the most prolific passing offenses in the NFL? Is it enough for me to take Thomas over Brandon Cooks, a guy who, no matter where he's been, as long as he's been on the field, he's produced. Quentin Johnson, upside. Elijah Moore, a guy who had a really good season in New York, maybe just needed to change of scenery. These, to me, are more exciting guys than Michael Thomas at this point.
And at some point, you should just hedge the younger guys. Like eventually, don't just remember the name. Don't just remember 2019 at this point. Who knows, man?
I think
It's been too long.
Yeah.
I think it was 2019. It's 2019. Like it's not 2019 anymore. Take a shot on someone else. Like that's. I think I've convinced myself. I think I'm out. Wait, I'm on the clock and I picked Michael Thomas. Oops, I messed this up.
Won't be listen. That's going to happen to me. I guarantee you that's going to happen to me several times this upcoming draft season. Probably already has happened if I go back and look at some of my teams. Let's wrap up hour one right now. When we come back, we're going to talk about the Dynasty trade charts that Alex produces with the DraftSharks team over at DraftSharks.com. We're going to tell you how to utilize those the draft value charts to not only understand what they are, but to use them and exploit them for your own personal gain in your dynasty leagues. And then we'll talk about some real life examples. We'll throw some names at Alex and sort of, get a feel on what you should be doing with those guys. We're going to talk about the dynamic most valuable player. We're going to talk about trade tax. A lot of stuff is going to go into this. So we'll get into the philosophy of Dynasty Fantasy Football coming up here in hour number 2 of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show right here in the Better Sports Network. Alex Korff from DraftSharks.com. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC. We'll kick off hour number 2 right after this.
The High Stakes Fantasy Football Show with Eric Balkman.
I feel like this is a quietly contentious point in Dynasty Fantasy Football, what it means to actually be rebuilding. Some people say you should never truly be rebuilding. How do you view the rebuilding versus competing dichotomy in Dynasty?
So I will be the first person to acknowledge that my preferred format of fantasy football is just redraft. The years that I have played Dynasty, it has been I've drafted a win now team because I've seen people that have just gotten into the cycle of rebuilding and thus they just don't make any progress. So if you're rebuilding for the 5th year in a row, I just, I don't know exactly how you get out of it, but yeah, it's definitely something that can happen. And a lot of people, especially when we come out of the NFL draft, everyone's just instantly shipping off, draft picks and everything. So, I mean, it's definitely something that can happen.
Joey, do you feel similarly to it? Do you feel like you see people getting stuck in the rebuilding loop?
I mean, I would say people that try to rebuild in the beginning of seasons, of their fantasy seasons, I see them get stuck in that rut. I would really try to only ever rebuild if I knew I was going to miss the playoffs. Like, I'm always trying to play to win, even if it's maybe I don't know.
I think my big thing is the word rebuild is a much shorter time frame than I think most people say it should be. Like, they look at rebuild as like 3 years out competing. Rebuild, you're looking to compete next season. You know what I mean? Like, if you're doing it now, you're looking to revamp, and maybe there's a 1 season where you ship it off, but that very next season you should be competing. If you're doing it like that, I'm cool with it, but you gotta have a plan, not just keep getting the young players, keep getting the draft picks. Otherwise, you end up like Tim. Maybe not like Tim who gets a bye, but you make the playoffs, you're in that like 4 to 6 range every year, just hovering in the middle. Nothing ever gets better, nothing ever gets worse.
I think I play like you in Dynasty, Simon. I play in 3-year windows.
100%. That's my go-to. And with the rate at which Dynasty leagues turn over, you should really only ever play in a 3-year window.
It's the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on Better Sports Network.
Get all-pro access to Fantasy Alarm for the award-winning DFS playbook covering 10 different sports, fantasy football, NFL betting, tools, podcasts, and the Discord chat as well for a limited time. Get all this for 50% off your first 6 months with promo code ALARM50. That's ALARM50 at fantasyalarm.com. Not 50. Alarm50 at fantasyalarm.com. Send those complaint letters in now. Start your free trial today. That's Fantasy Alarm's all sports subscription. This is the Better Sports Network's High Stakes Fantasy Football Show. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC, the HSFF Hour, and of course, the road of his High Stakes Lowdown. He is Alex Korff, the product manager over at DraftSharks.com. Before we get into this, you had, and I meant to get to this in the first hour and I totally forgot, you had sort of an interesting entry, not only into the fantasy football industry, but fantasy football in general. A lot of the people watching, a lot of the people listening, a lot of the people who come on this show have been playing fantasy football for years, sometimes decades. I don't want to say you're brand new to it because you clearly know what you're doing and you're very good at it. But how did you get involved in fantasy football? And then how did you get involved with the industry and then DraftSharks, obviously, this year?
Yeah, one of my guilty pleasures is listening to her name is Casey Kasem. She does the Get Real with Casey Kasem pod, where she interviews people as they start their journey into the industry, and I just love it. But everyone's like, yeah, I started playing where we had to fax in our lineup and look at the newspaper and do all that. We started in 1987 or whatever. I started playing in 2017, so that was my first season. So I graduated grad school in 2016. My wife, our girlfriend at the time, and I moved all the way across the country from Missouri to North Carolina. She then accepted a job in Atlanta. I had just started, so I couldn't move. So all of a sudden, I'm living alone. I had nothing. But my college buddies reached out that summer and like, hey, Alex, do you want to join a fantasy football league? And I was like, I have literally nothing going on in my life. I just moved across the country. I'm 1,000 miles away from you guys. The love of my life is 6 hours away by car. Yeah, hell yeah, let's do it. No idea. I wasn't really a sports kid. I was a nerd. I still am. So I joined. I started playing. I said I would join, and I'm an engineer. So what I did is I obsessively consumed podcasts. Mm-hmm. I'm talking 10 to 12 hours a day of podcasts. I was working in a lab. I would put it in. I would listen at 1.5 to 2x speed, and I just consumed. And I still do that. But nowhere near as much. I don't have anywhere near as much.
Do you do it 7 days a week or just 5 days a week?
I would do it. I would do it 7 days a week. I mean, I consume everyone's. Like I didn't have anything. I didn't have any friends.
Yeah.
So my first year, I get in there as redraft. I won my first year. Loved it. I was hooked. But what's funny is I started making content my very first year. I started producing trade value charts week 7 of my first season. So I'm very active on Reddit. That's where I started. What I did is I would just take values, mush them together, do some correction, and I built a model. That's what I did. I was an engineer, and it was really easy, and I started publishing it for free. And then the following year, I kept doing it because people kept asking for it. And they're like, well, Alex, they didn't know my name. My username was Peaked in high school. Right. They're like, can we just give you money? Can we like Venmo you money for this? We appreciate you. I'm like, yeah, hell yeah. So I like set up to buy me a beer. I would give people my Venmo, my Patreon, or my PayPal, and they just pay me. It was cool. And they're like, hey, set up a Patreon. So I did. And that's kind of just how it all started. So I set up Patreon in 2018, less than a year after starting fantasy football, because I was building a tool that people loved.
Yeah.
And then from there, I ran into the Front Yard Fantasy guys, JL and Simon, and they were just like, "What are you?" we met and we just hooked up. They introduced me over to Nando at the Athletic. I started writing for them. It was just a weird entry point of like, I was just throwing stuff out into the wind, and people liked it, and then people found it, and they found me, and it was kind of the same with DraftSharks, where Matt slid into my DMs and it was like, hey, we're hiring for someone. I was like, cool. But then it was a whole process. I actually told him no the first time, several times, because I just, it's almost surreal thinking that you can move into the industry full time from an engineering position. So, but I mean, I love it.
Well, and I'll tell you this too, like, we at the FFPC, we've always loved DraftSharks. I mean, like, Lenny Papano, and then obviously Matt and Jared have been on this show before. I've had them on my other shows. I think they do great work. And then Kevin English, obviously, as well. And then I noticed that like DraftSharks got the two big additions, or at least the two big additions I saw was you and Herms. Herms was on this show a couple of months ago too. And like now, like, I don't want to say the force is complete because I know Lenny's always been building over there. But man, the additions that you guys provide, I mean, it's absolutely crushing it right now. I want to bring this up that as we get into the Dynasty trade charts, not sharks. I don't really know, like, I don't know what your role is in assembling. like you use the other guy's rankings and then other data, or how do you build these dynasty trade value charts, Alex?
So the ones that I still do on this under as peaked in high school and post on Reddit and still post. Those are still a market. I aggregate ranks, push them through a model, and then calibrate them based on trades to make trade values. These are not the same. So what we do here is based on the projections that Jared does, award-winning projections. He does 1 year projections at the team level all the way down. I mean, he was projecting Tristan Ebner. Like that's how meticulous this dude is. That's the backbone of all of our tools. So from there, we also then one of the things I do is I really do a lot of work on their back end of their dynasty projections. So we do 1, 3, 5, and up to 10-year projections for every player.
Wow.
Yeah. But we aren't going in and saying, hey, next year they're going to do this. It's all based on age curves and retirement rates, not just based on positionally, but on archetypes of positions. So running quarterbacks, how's a running quarterback going to age? What's their retirement rate? And not just the rate that they actually retire. It's the rate that they are replaced. It's the rate that they have a career or a season-ending injury. So all of that, I mean, it's built on machine learning, and it gets smarter every single year. So this year is one of the years that we rolled it out and made some pretty aggressive changes, especially breaking out running backs and wide receivers, depending on how they play the position, size, where they're drafted, really kind of because all of that matters. And it's all kind of related to our sports injury predictor, where that one uses 1,072 variables as inputs to predict injuries. Because I was just looking at the code yesterday. This one doesn't use quite that many because it doesn't matter that they're not that sticky, but that's what we're doing. So that's the baseline, is how are they going to produce, not just for the next 1 year, but up to 10 years with a lot of weight on the closer years. Because 10 years from now isn't really when you're going to be playing. Right.
Like, that to me, you look at the 10-year projections, that would just be fun for me. Like I wouldn't put a whole lot of stock into it, or maybe I should, I don't know.
No, I mean, they're interesting. They do not have a lot of weight in the model in the scheme of things.
All right.
So 1 year through your first 3 years, we're pretty certain that we can project it and with some certainty, especially 1 year. 5 years still has some weight, and then 10 year, it's there.
I feel like this is a quietly contentious.
I wanted to ask you this. In assembling the data, how far back do you go, and when do you think it was an appropriate year to stop at, as far as when you look at previous year's data? Like how did you figure out, okay, we're going to go back this far and this is why we're choosing this year? Oh,
that's an easy one. I go back to 1999, and that is because that is when they first started getting all of the data I wanted.
Got it. Got it. Okay.
I think an argument could be made for going back farther, mostly just to make sure you're getting the full careers of a lot of people when you're looking at it. But at the same time, the NFL changes so much. Like we're moving towards lighter wide receivers. We're moving towards different running back breakdowns. So it's not necessarily predictive, and there's more weight put on the more recent years. So let's say the last 5 years of how we expect the running backs to be utilized and age and really same wide receivers, tight ends, all of that. So the closer you are, the more value it has, or the more predictive we think it is. But we do go all the way back to 1999. Not arbitrary, but kind of arbitrary. I mean, it's your data. What comes out is only as good as what goes in.
And whatever point you pick, I mean, it's going to be arbitrary, right? I mean, you have to pick something. Okay, so let's get into the nuts and bolts of the dynasty trade charts at DraftSharks. Dynamic most valuable player. Can you tell our listeners who might be looking at that, our viewers, I should say, who might be looking at that, what that is, and why do they need to know it? Why is this significant?
Yeah, so that's the baseline of basically everything we do. It powers all of our tools. So projections go into that, and then from there we use a cross-positional algorithm that looks at league scoring and calculates what let's say a wide receiver is going to score 10 points. Versus a running back that's going to score 10 points. But what does that mean if you only have to start 2 running backs and 3 wide receivers? 10 and 10 aren't the same. So you cross-positionally account for that based on your scoring. So that's where we get into that dynamic MVP. So let's say you're doing a draft. You have a value, but then 5 running backs go off the board. All of a sudden, that running back versus what's left in your player pool changes.
Yep.
So that's where that dynamic comes in. So that's what powers our draft war room. So it live syncs with your league, with your exact scoring, which will change each of those values. Let's say you do 2-point tight end premium because you're a degenerate like me. Your tight ends are very important in that scoring format. So just generic rankings or generic trade value charts just can't account for that. And that's where that dynamic comes in, because we just can and we do.
I've used that. I like the redraft, the dynamic MVP boards. Obviously, I use it for Scott Fishbowl every. You know what's funny is so way back in the day, the first time I was actually asked by Scott to be in the Scott Fishbowl, I was overwhelmed. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing here. I need some help. Who did I contact but Matt Schauf? And Matt and we were like co-managers for the first 2 years we were in it, and we crushed it. I think we won the league both times. And then the following year, the third year, I said, "Hey man, are you back for another year to co-manage the Scott Fishbowl team with me?" He's like, "No, buddy, I think I'm out. Scott gave me my own team this year." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, so I'm on my own." So what did I do? I used the DraftSharks MVP board, and it's so valuable for stuff like that when to adjust on the fly and find out, it points out the sleepers, the busts, the values, everything like that. And it adjusts after every pick, which is something that ranking sheets just won't give you. So I really appreciate that and what you guys do over there at DraftSharks. Okay, getting back to Dynasty. I always say when people ask me Dynasty questions, I always say try to get the best player in the deal. That's what you should be going for, right? Now, if you're not going to get the best player in the deal, that there has to be some way that you make up for letting go of the best player that's switching teams, right? This is trade tax, right? Am I right? Tell us a little bit about trade tax, and then how do you calculate it?
Yeah, so it's more of like it's a concept, right? So let's say you want to trade for a player that has a value of 100. That's the best. That's the max you can have. You cannot send 2 players with a value of 50. We can even pull an example. So 100 would be Justin Jefferson.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He's the best in a 1 quarterback league. A 50-point player would be, let's see here, Drake London and Derrick Henry. Would you accept Drake London and Derrick Henry for Justin Jefferson?
I would. There's no way I would.
Hell no, because there's a trade tax involved that you have to calculate. So you don't want to send embarrassing trades. You don't want to accept bad trades. When you are trade value charts are great when you're doing 1-for-1 trades. Like if you want to send Bijan Robinson for CeeDee Lamb, they're about the same level. Sure, that's totally fine. If you start doing 2-for-1s or 3-for-1s, that's where you need to pay some sort of tax. So what I did in 2019 is I did a study because I'm an engineer, and that's what I do. And I pulled I pulled 10,000 trades that were completed. Threw it into a spreadsheet and then through R, and then applied my trade values to them to look at 2-for-1 trades, and then 3-for-1s and 3-for-2s to generate curves to figure out how much that trade tax needs to be for it to be considered fair. And what we found is that in a 2-for-1, it's not just a flat tax. It's I guess it's similar to the U.S. system where it changes, right? The higher you go, the more your trade tax. And the bigger difference. So let's say you're trading 2 players. You're trying to get Justin Jefferson again, but you're going to send Jalen Waddle this time, and he's relatively close. You maybe don't have to spend as much of a trade tax, but kind of my rule of thumb is if you are trying to buy really high, like a great asset, and you're sending a 2-for-1, you're probably going to have to overpay by 50%. So you're going to have to multiply Justin Jefferson by 50%. So you probably have to send Jalen Waddle and Breece Hall to get Justin Jefferson, probably. Man, that might be a little high, but something like that.
I don't think that's high. I think that'd be pretty accurate.
Yeah, but as you go lower, as that one value changes and it gets lower, let's say he drops down to DK Metcalf, you probably don't need to send 75 to get the 56 of DK Metcalf. You could probably send 60 or so.
Right.
Like that's that trade tax, and it's conceptual. It's that trade tax is where the beauty of dynasty trading comes in is understanding what's reasonable to offer or accept, because there's a lot of wiggle room in there of maybe you're higher on a player or lower, and understanding But that's where you can gain value, or you can really screw yourself if you aren't paying attention.
The Dynasty trade charts that you have at DraftSharks, if people want to exploit that, I guess the best way to do it is understand that while these are their rankings, but it's you're running through like a ton of trades, right? Real life trades that this is what the actual price is going for. So you can kind of be ahead of the game and know that if somebody lowballs you, or maybe you counter with something, it can look, I guess it can look all right on paper and look even on paper, but you have this algorithm and this chart that you have, and you could actually be massively winning this trade without the other person sort of realizing, right?
Yeah, it's really any of these are basically a tool, right? So long as you
Right.
understand it and understand the assumptions that go into it and the value it has, you can definitely find ways to make things work, or get an edge on your. I mean, the whole goal is, right, to get an edge on the other people in your league. But all of it is it's one of the more fun things I'm working on. I'm still working on our upgraded trade calculator, actually, that looks at that trade tax as well as a whole bunch of different fields, how the age changes of your team, your retirement rate, all of that. That should be coming out in the next couple of weeks. I'm excited. It's getting close to beta, but they wanted to get the trade chart out first, and then the next level on top of that, if you're really a degenerate like me and want that more analytics to look at your team, look at your league, that's where it really gets fun.
I think I want to. Well, I don't know if the trade charts are going to show us necessarily about these players, or maybe you can look it up and maybe you'll see something. But I want to talk about some players that are currently polarizing is the wrong term, but they're let's just call them interesting guys in FFPC Dynasty leagues right now, which you can sign up for at myffpc.com. I'm looking at the data. I have about 24 worth of startup drafts right now when I talk about the ADP for these guys. Now, Deshaun Watson was a player that I saw traded a lot last year because people knew that he was going to be out for a while, and they were willing to, if they felt they were rebuilding or they weren't competing this year, they were willing to eat that and just, get Deshaun Watson for 75 cents, 70 cents on the dollar, what have you. Now that is not the case. He is going to be ready week one. And he's going to have Amari Cooper. He's going to have Nick Chubb. He's going to have David Njoku, Elijah Moore, all these other guys, Donovan Peoples-Jones, David Bell. He is quarterback 10 right now in FFPC Dynasty startups. He's going at the 803. That's not necessarily, I want to talk about it more from where he's going amongst other quarterbacks. There's a pretty big chasm. I mean, you're talking about 2.5 rounds difference between the next closest quarterback above him in Anthony Richardson, and then the next closest quarterback below him is about 1.5 rounds in Bryce Young. So when you look at Deshaun Watson, is this the type of guy that you should be buying right now? Is he the type of guy you should be selling? Or if you have him, are you holding on to him just to see what happens over the course of the first couple months of the season, Alex?
He's tough. I think he was – a lot of people bought him hoping he would turn it on at the end of the year too.
Right, yes.
That did not work. That did not work out. We have him ranked and projected as 10th right now as well. So we're right there. But the caveat is he is within 2 points of like 5 other quarterbacks. Like I think an argument could be made for several different ones. Not like two dimensionless trade value points, right? He's tough. You've probably missed the boat to buy low, unless he just doesn't figure it back out. But I mean, he has the team around him. You forgot Cedric Tillman.
Tillman is another guy they just drafted. Yeah. I knew there was somebody I was forgetting. Yeah,
he's interesting. Like I liked him. I think he's a good piece for. He's probably not particularly interesting in fantasy, but he's a good piece for the team.
I think like over the course of, I'm trying to think of how far back this goes. Was it the COVID year? Was it 2020 or I can't remember. I think it was 2020. And I had James Robinson on a lot of dynasty teams, and the Jacksonville Jaguars had 2 first-round picks that year, and they obviously used their first one on Trevor Lawrence. And then I was like, okay, all I got to do is avoid them taking a running back here in round 1, maybe day 2. I don't think it affects them that much. Robinson was a stud last year. And I remember I was doing a live broadcast on terrestrial radio, and I had to watch my tongue because I was so ticked off when they took Travis Etienne. Yeah. And so then it was like, okay, now I have to look at from the standpoint of, I have to trade up and try to get ETN on my roster in my dynasty leagues, or I have to get rid of Robinson because I don't want this headache. Well, then it turned out that ETN broke his kneecap, right? Wasn't it his kneecap?
Liz Frank in his foot.
Liz Frank, yeah, thank you. And he was out, so I got another full year of Robinson until he went down with the Achilles, and then it was the ETN show. Now James Robinson's not even on the Jaguars anymore, and yet we're still looking at kind of this maddening thing where the Jacksonville Jaguars not only draft Hank Bigsby in the draft, but he's getting steamed up by not only the team, his teammates, and a lot of pundits out there. So now, once again, Travis Etienne, I know I know he wants to handle the workload. I don't know if the Jaguars are ready to give him the keys to do everything there, but he's being drafted as running back 7 in FFPC Dynasty startups. Alex, you have to soak a late second-round pick into ETN if you want him. He's right behind Barkley. He's right ahead of Eckler. You look at ETN right now. This is an interesting guy because I think whether you're telling me you're buying him, whether you're telling me you're selling him, I think you can make strong cases for doing either one.
Yeah. So we are pretty firmly on the sell side here. So we are, as a group, we aren't all one hive mind. We just happen to be on this one. Usually we're fighting, but on this one,
Right.
we're pretty much agreeing. We did make the decision while Jared was on vacation because he would not have agreed. But Matt is really out on ETN, Herms as well. Kevin seemed on board as well. It just Tank he's real. He's a threat. He matters. He is likely better than James Robinson. I mean, almost definitely, right?
Yeah.
Like, and ETN is 7 is rich. Second round pick is rich. I think we have him down at 10 or 11. Behind Eckler, behind Najee, behind Ramondre. And that one I would listen to arguments the other way, but they're basically tied. But it's more fun to say he's behind him.
If you were going to trade Kenneth Walker, you'd have to give up Kenneth Walker plus to get ETN right now, right?
Yeah, for sure. Okay. For sure. You would maybe not a ton because I mean they ended up in nearly identical situations, right? Where only Charbonnet was a second-round pick and a better prospect than Tank Bigsby. And I think the gap between Kenneth Walker and Charbonnet is too high right now. That's one that I've been pounding the table on. Like we should bring them closer because we have, let's say, Walker at 51, and then Charbonnet would be at. I can find him in a sec, somewhere. He's 30 or so.
Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. What about as we talk about these ETN trade possibilities? I think another like guy that would be interesting is Tony Pollard, right? Because everybody's ready. I've said on this show numerous times, I've been saying it for years. There are so many high stakes players in the FFPC that have been saying for like last 3+ years that Tony Pollard was the better option than Ezekiel Elliott in that backfield. And now they're going to get their way. Pollard's going to be the lead running back. But sometimes I wonder, like, okay, well, if are they going to give him too much to handle? And if that's the case, I don't necessarily want Pollard when he's coming off the injury. So when you consider Tony Pollard with Travis Etienne, how much more would you have to give up to get Etienne if you're offering Pollard?
I don't think you'd have to give a lot. I think
you think they're pretty close. Where's Pollard? Where's Pollard right now in the DraftSharks rankings as far as dynasty running backs go?
Behind him.
Okay, so they're basically even. All right.
Yeah, but there's a little bit of a tier between them in the scheme of things. Like the top 11 are within a point or two, whereas when you drop from Travis Etienne to Pollard, it's about a 8% difference. So okay. I mean, it's you would have to add something that the person probably cares about, or maybe they're a contender. I mean, there has to be a driving force, just like with any trade.
Yeah. We talked about quarterbacks and running backs. Let's get to a wide receiver I think is interesting for Dynasty, and that's Cooper Kupp. A guy who I was just reading about this the other day. Before he got hurt last year, he was almost on par as far as fantasy points per game go. He was almost on par with that massive record-setting season he had in 2021. Now you look at Cooper Kupp in FFPC startup drafts, he's fallen to wide receiver 13. At the 303, behind Drake London, right ahead of Jackson Smith and Jigba. But Cooper Kupp, I mean, obviously the lazy analysis said, well, if you're trying to win now, trade for him now. Trade your picks to get Cooper Kupp now. But maybe is there more to Cooper Kupp than that? Are we signaling the end of his career prematurely if we say he's just simply a win now guy?
Yeah, I think he's I think a lot of so I try and play in a 3-year window. I think that's reasonably standard. You'll hear a lot of people saying that because I think it's probably one of the most realistic ways to play. I think Cooper Kupp's probably going to be relevant for the next 3 years. He might not be, Triple Crown relevant, but he easily could be this year and very likely next year. And then maybe he's 80% of what he was the following year and then starts to tail off. There's a non-zero chance that Drake London, JSN are never as good as Cooper Kupp is this year and next year. Absolutely a chance. And I love Drake London. I mean, I have Drake London everywhere. So sometimes I think we get a little too ageist in the Dynasty community.
Yeah.
That's definitely like, oh no, he's 30 years old. He's dead. He like what Christian McCaffrey turned 27 today, I think. I think Kluge tweeted that. So he's gone. Take a 3rd round pick for him. No, some players are still elite. Like it's until we start seeing them not be elite.
Yeah, we will. It's actually 1 week from today. Cooper Kupp enters the 30-year-old club, along with Devontae Adams and Odell Beckham Jr., according to the Google machine, as it were. Speaking of tough guys to rate, and this will be the last one I want to get to before we get to our final break, Kyle blanking Pitts. I mean, this guy, I can't remember a player that has been so polarizing his first 3 years in the league. First year, I mean, obviously FFPC is tight end premium, so people were very excited about drafting Kyle Pitts, right? And there were a lot of people that thought, like, I don't believe the hype. I'm not getting into it. Somebody else can take him. And he was polarizing then. Then he has the big season. And then this past year, people are like, okay, it's a fluke. He's not going to do it again. And then he got steamed up even a little bit more, and then obviously had the injury. And I think now with the injury that he's been rehabbing and the fact that he wasn't all that great to start the season when he was healthy, has a lot of people pulling back on that. Man, you got to have the perfect trade partner to pull off a Kyle Pitts trade in your league where you guys, where you and your other partner or you and your other competitor in the league, you have to value him about the same, because otherwise I can't see how you pull this guy off in a trade. He's all over the place. Alex, is this what you're seeing as well?
Yeah, it seems like, especially over the last 2 years, whoever valued him the most in your league now rosters him.
Yep, exactly.
Full stop. So he's one of those that he's not going to move because one, they had to spend so much to get him that they're invested. They won't sell out. But he is tough. Like I still think there's an argument between him and Mark Andrews as even the tight end 1 in Dynasty. Just because like the next 2 years of production, that, I mean, it might be a while till we see Pitts really, really change the game. Like really, I mean, step up. And he also still might not. It might be the 2017 tight end class all over again. OJ Howard and Njoku and Everett. Yeah.
Gerald Everett. Sure.
Yeah.
Right now, by the way, this probably isn't surprising, or maybe it is. The tight end 1 in FFPC Dynasty startups, Travis Kelce still. He's just, and it's hard to fault it, right? I mean, because he just puts up big numbers every single year. If you want to trade him, you'll probably get some pretty good value for him. But then right after that, Kelce at the 209, Kyle Pitts at the 302, Mark Andrews at the 305. Those are the top 3 there. And then you get your TJ Hawkinson at the 306. Then nobody else goes off the board until the late 5th. Okay, a lot of great stuff there. Check out those Dynasty trade charts, DraftSharks.com. I want to take our final break. When we come back, I want to take a look at rookies from a redraft standpoint, not necessarily Dynasty leagues anymore. We're going to talk about what the impact of guys like Jordan Addison, Jonathan Mingo, Israel Abanikanda, Jaden Reed, CJ Stroud. How good are these guys going to be in 2023 as we are slipping in to redraft season? I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC. He is Alex Korff, the product manager for DraftSharks.com. This is the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show only on the Better Sports Network.
The High Stakes Fantasy Football Show with Eric Balkman.
Patrick Kane, the longtime Chicago Blackhawk, who was traded from Chicago to the New York Rangers this year, set up for free agency. But news came yesterday that he has now had hip surgery at the age of 34, and he is going to be out for 4 to 6 months. Now, Kane is probably going to Toronto as a Hall of Famer. Not to Toronto as a Maple Leaf, but, he's going to be a Hall of Famer. He's got 3 Stanley Cup rings. He's one of the all-time greats in Chicago Blackhawk this year. I was shocked when I looked at the like free agency rankings this year going into the offseason, and like Patrick Kane I saw a couple places where he was the #1 free agent. I saw a few more where he was #3 or #4 or 5. I couldn't wrap my head around that. I am surprised, and maybe it speaks more to the available free agents, and I think that is part of the case. I mean, you've got, I guess, Bergeron's out there, Tarasenko, Ryan O'Reilly. Like, to see a guy coming off the season he had, Patrick Kane had a bad season. It might have been his worst season. He had 57 points in 73 games. I was surprised to see that he would be sought after in this market. Now, he is a veteran. He is a respected dude. He's got the Stanley Cup rings, all of that, but paying $6-7 million a season for a 34-year-old, couldn't see it. And now with this hip surgery that was announced yesterday, who signs this guy? And I mean, Patrick Kane was dealing with a hip issue all year. Now, he played through it, give him credit. He chose to have the surgery. He probably knew that if a team even was interested in him, they'd look at the meds and they'd put him through a physical and say, oh, this ain't going to happen. So he just decided to take care of it. Now, you play this out 4 to 6 months, you're talking anywhere between like October and Christmas for Patrick Kane. So even if you sign the guy, you're going to have a guy nearing 35, and you're going to get him for a half season. So I will be following that market. I mean, is anybody giving him more than like a $3 million base or $2 million base? Is anybody giving him more than a year? I mean, sure, there'll be incentives and options and all that, but there's a guy that lost a lot of money getting set for NHL free agency. Again, that opens on July 1st.
It's the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on Better Sports Network.
24 minutes until the top of the hour when Dynasty Nerds and Garrett Price take you away on the remainder of your Thursday evening here of Fantasy Football Entertainment. It is Fantasy Football Thursday. Right here on the Better Sports Network, you are currently, hopefully, enjoying the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show with Eric Balkman, me from the FFPC, and, of course, Alex Korff, the product manager over at DraftSharks.com. We just got done talking about all these this great Dynasty analysis, Dynasty trade analysis, the Dynasty trade charts over at DraftSharks.com. You can actually register for Dynasty startups now at myffpc.com. $100 level is where they start. They go all the way up to the $5,000 level. Dynasty drafts at the FFPC have been going on for about a decade, 1,300 plus drafts. Not a single one has ever folded. So if you're looking for a Dynasty league that's going to be there for the long haul, myffpc.com is where to go, myffpc.com. All right. Now, as we slip into the redraft portion of the rookie season, one of the things, and Alex, I don't know if you've noticed this in your drafts, but so many high-stakes players I've talked to over the years. So one of the most difficult parts of the drafting season is when they get out of Dynasty rookie draft season and they got to take their ibuprofen. They have to take their tonic or whatever to get rid of rookie fever, because these rookies go up the draft board so high because everybody's so used to drafting them. They're very excited about drafting them. But you got to remember, you're drafting them from a Dynasty standpoint, not a redraft standpoint. And I think that as we have done drafts at the FFPC over the course of the last, almost 15 years now, we've seen rookies start off high and then gradually it goes down in ADP as we get closer and closer to the start of the NFL season. So we're going to try to start making that process a little bit easier for everybody tonight. We're going to rip off the proverbial Band-Aid, and we're going to talk about these guys from a rookie, from a redraft standpoint. And we'll start off with the quarterbacks. CJ Stroud, I think I saw you tweet about this. You have him in a lot of your rookie leagues. He's going as quarterback 29 right now. He's basically a final round pick in Houston. They're going to be throwing a lot this year. Obviously, in a super flex, you got to make sure that all the quarterbacks are rostered. What kind of value is Stroud going to have in year one? You're obviously a believer in his talent.
I like him. I liked him as a prospect. Just not even in a dynasty sense. Just like I think second overall pick, and he was just good, right? He was just good. I think hoping that he's going to be good in 2023 is probably not the right decision, but he's interesting, right? There's so many. He's one of the quarterbacks that really has a high range of outcomes. We didn't think Deshaun Watson was going to be great his rookie year there, right? He started behind Tom Savage. Might be a made-up name.
That's a blast from the past.
It's a blast from the past, right? Yeah. But then he went on a tear. Like, so we should never rule out extraordinary cases like that. But he's going as what? What do you say? Like quarterback?
He's going to quarterback 29. I just looked at the
Yeah.
FFPC Superflex Best Ball Tournament. He's actually going as quarterback 24 there at the 706, ahead of Kyler Murray, by the way.
That's fascinating to me.
Mhm.
I would take Kyler Murray in a Superflex league. Well, I mean, CJ Stroud is probably going to start week 1. Is Kyler Murray, and that's what they're betting. But I mean, like, there's a non-zero chance that a wide receiver in your quarterback in your Superflex spot might not be, or even a tight end, or something might not be better than CJ Stroud is first. I mean, it definitely can happen. I would take Kyler Murray every time over CJ Stroud. Like, that's interesting.
One of the guys that the first overall pick, Bryce Young, is going to be throwing to this year is Jonathan Mingo. Now, I took Mingo in one Dynasty league because I was of the belief that the other guys that were on the Panthers do not scream number 1 wide receiver to me. Adam Thielen, Laviska Shenault, Terrace Marshall, DJ Chark. All these guys are just, there's something there, but none of them have that number 1 mindset. So or at least gives me puts me in the frame of mind that this is going to be the number 1 receiver there. So I was like, well, it's got to be Mingo, right? And then I talked to people and they're like, yeah, Balky, we don't think it's going to be Mingo either, as the number 1 receiver there, which is frustrating because the opportunity is there this year. Obviously Thielen is going to get a ton of targets. But other than that, nobody scares me. I mean, Terrace Marshall, I'm kind of over with at this point. Jonathan Mingo, 2023 is rookie season. There's a lot of opportunity there, and there could be some NFC South shootouts there. Your thoughts on what Mingo can do for you if you draft him in, let's just see where he's going here in the Fantasy Pros Championship. Wide receiver 59 at the 13th round, early 13th.
Say 59?
Yes.
Yeah. See, so I when I went over that team, I had the exact same thought. Adam Thielen's a great wide receiver 2.
Mm-hmm.
When healthy, is a great field stretcher, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. Mingo could be the dude. Like he is. I mean, he's built. He has that alpha type. Like that. That's what I wanted. That's what. And I liked him as a prospect a lot. Like I was the highest on him of the group here, and I've been pounding the table to try and get him higher. He is at 15 at wide receiver 59. That late, take a shot. Like there's few people around his range that have the potential to be the guy on their team. I'm absolutely not saying that is even likely, but
Right.
how many other ones can you make an argument about that? Like we just don't know, and that uncertainty is maybe not being banked in. 59 seems reasonable.
Ironically enough, Adam Thielen is wide receiver 57, so he's barely ahead of him. Let me throw this one at you because Romeo Doubs has been working out with Jordan Love the last couple of seasons. He's drawing rave reviews from the beat reporters, the coaches, and his teammates in Packers OTAs, catching a lot of passes. I think Matt LaFleur said he just looks more violent in his cuts, like just more sure of himself this year, which you would expect, making that leap from your rookie season to your second season. He's going 1 spot ahead of Jonathan Mingo. What one would you rather have for redraft, Dobbs, or would you rather have Jonathan Mingo?
Mingo, and it's not even close.
Really?
I shoot for the ceiling, man. I don't care. Like, so if obviously it depends on your roster construction, right? Yeah. If you have done bully running back and tight end and early quarterback, and you don't have any wide receivers somehow, and you've gotten into the 9th, and you want someone that's definitely going to be fine, Romeo Doubs. Sure, okay. That's totally fine. But I want to win. Not first or last.
Right. And I always say this. Well, I don't always say this. Yeah. And I brought his name up on the show before. Joe Delzanero out of Chicago, longtime FFPC high stakes player. He's sort of like, at least to me, he's been the Yogi Berra of the FFPC with a lot of the stuff he said. But he's always said for years, there is no such thing as a bad draft pick after the 10th round. In other words, whatever you want to do once you get in the 11th to the 20th rounds, just do it. Like it doesn't matter at that point. And you shouldn't be worried about missing on those guys. You talked about Kyler Murray as a 15th round pick. Well, if you miss on him and he never plays this year, who cares? Jonathan Mingo, 13th round. If you miss on him and he's just okay, well, who cares? It was a 13th round pick. But the upside of Mingo, I get where you're coming from. That's why you swing for the doubles in the first 10 rounds, and then it's those home run swings in rounds 11 through 20.
Yeah. Christian Watson last year, exact same situation where you had to be patient. And I'm not saying Mingo's week 1 going to be the dude. I'm not even saying week 4. Like he's one that like you want to have a build, or you want to have a team that you can hold where you have other people you can drop to work the waiver wire, and then other like you have to be smart about it. Like you can't have all Jonathan Mingo types on your team.
Right.
That's going to be a terrible team, probably.
It will be.
You have to,
Yep.
yeah, you have to. When you take those dart throws, you can do a couple like that, and you got to be smart about it.
Especially with managed teams rather than best ball. Best ball too. I've seen some pretty crazy stuff at receiver work out. It rarely works out in managed teams. Jordan Addison versus Quentin Johnston. I have Jordan Addison on exactly 0 of my teams. I only have Quentin Johnston on like 2. But your thoughts, because I think, you know, we bring the Mingo theorem into this. Johnston looks like he has the tools, the build to be an alpha, to be that number 1 wide receiver. I don't know if Addison has either of those, but it really doesn't matter because he ain't going to never be the number 1 wide receiver as long as he's in Minnesota and Justin Jefferson's there. What about these guys in redraft? It seems like, and I think DraftSharks is pretty high on Addison as the number 1 receiver for redraft, right?
Yeah, not number 1 of those out of those 2, not over Justin Jefferson.
No, I'm talking about rookie receivers this year.
Yeah.
Isn't Addison DraftSharks number 1 rookie receiver for redraft? I think so.
I would say definitely. Like the target competition there, he's good. I mean, right? He slates to be. He's very likely good. He's a first-round draft pick. He's probably going to integrate right into that offense and fill the Adam Thielen role. Hopefully, that the 2020, 2019 healthy Adam Thielen had. So he has a ton of good upside. Not the ceiling, but I mean, definitely very solid. Quentin Johnston, I think Jared said he's a big wide receiver that plays like a small wide receiver or something like that. Where he said Josh Downs played bigger than him. So he's one that like, and Matt loved him. He was his wide receiver 1 in the class. Still is. And it's upside, right? It's once again of if he decides to play like the 6'3" or 6'4" build, 215 pounds. I mean, he's a man. He's a dude. Yep. So if he puts it together and he wants to play like that, and then he has all the stuff that you can't learn, the speed, the talent, he has a ton of upside as well. But Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Guyton, and then Palmer.
Josh Palmer.
Yeah. There's a lot there, but he also has Herbert throwing to him and not Kirk Cousins, who is solid, but he's not slinging it down the field like Herbert. So I would definitely go Addison. I'm pretty bullish on Addison for redraft as well.
Getting back to the Packers here, Jaden Reed has been working in OTAs for Green Bay as the starting slot guy with Dobbs and Watson working outside. Do you think, knowing that he might be counted on as a security blanket type receiver in that Packers offense this year? Not saying, well, I mean, Musgrave, obviously, and Tucker Kraft, they're going to be dump-off options with those 2 guys, and Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. But Jaden Reed, can he have a wide receiver? What's the likelihood, I should say, that he finishes among the top 50 receivers in his rookie campaign?
Top 50 feels rich, but he's also a large part of the reason that I am not super into Dobbs for this year, and would absolutely take Mingo over him. I think that Reed and Dobbs will be very similar finishes, but probably more in the 60 to 70 range. It really depends. It depends if they really pepper him out of a slot, if he really gets a lot and then has some touchdown luck. I think it's possible to get into the 50s. He's one that I would not be surprised if he came on faster than some of the other rookies, that he's maybe just ready and he just integrates into that offense. And then he's one that you might not have to wait on, where some of the other rookie wide receivers, you sometimes have to wait a couple. Even Justin Jefferson, we had to wait, 4 weeks or so his rookie year until he really went. Jaden Reed, I don't know, the way he plays and the way he could fit in that offense, I could see it going the other way.
From a redraft perspective, now that I know that one of the reasons you're down on Dobbs is because of Reed, are you also down on Watson because of Reed, or is Watson sort of his own thing?
Yeah, they don't really play the same. They play the same position, but they're not. I don't think they're going to play the same role in the offense. Not that Dobbs played a lot of the slot, really, if I remember right. But I think in terms of distribution and just terms of talent, Matt was super high on Reed, and he convinced the rest of us to be as well. I think he just kind of badgered us over the head with it until we decided that, okay, yeah, he's good. and I mean, he did show it on the film. He broke out as a true freshman. He's very likely going to be good.
Right. Okay, moving on to, let's see how much time. Yeah, we're doing good on time. Breece Hall, your thoughts on when he comes back? Is this going to be a thing where we're going to see him in September, or is it going to take longer? And if it does take longer, is Israel Abanikanda actually going to be the guy that you want there over Michael Carter, over Zonovan Knight?
Yeah, I think that one's interesting. So, I mean, our recent experience is Dobbins coming back from the knee and taking more than the 6 to 9 months typical. Let's see, who else was recent on ACL? I mean, that's the one that like was last year. We have Williams, and it sounds not great for Williams, but from everything we heard, the ACL tear for Breece Hall versus for Dobbins was not the same.
Right.
Breece Hall's was clean, whereas Dobbins was like just mangled. It's hanging on by a thread or whatever. I'm not really sure. I'm not a doctor, but it sounded bad. Like there was a lot of acronyms that I think he wanted to have connected in his knee that just were not. So, I mean, there's a chance, a pretty good chance that Breece Hall is just back week 1, maybe comes on a little bit slow. I would not be surprised if it's still just Michael Carter, but the rookie's a lot more fun to draft.
Yes.
In redraft, but just because he's fun doesn't mean that that's the right decision. It's the right answer is probably still Carter, but Abanikanda is harder to say, but a lot more fun to draft.
He and to me, like I talked to a lot of high stakes players prior to the NFL draft, and I said, hey, who's a sleeper that you're going to be watching for on day 2 or day 3 for rookie drafts? And Israel Abanikanda was mentioned several times, and he's a player. It's not like he's too small to play the position. No. It's not like he's just a banger that can't catch. I mean, he can do it, and he's got some breakaway speed too. Like he does a lot
fast.
He's got a lot of things that we as fantasy players covet in our running backs, and that's what I'm saying. Like, man, like if Hall comes back slow, which he may or may not, we don't know. Abanikanda could be the guy, and I don't know. Maybe it's one of those things where this is an offense, like it's a real offense now that they have Aaron Rodgers, and they take things a little bit more seriously, and they're putting Carter out there and they're putting Knight out there because they trust him a little bit more. But man, you're right. Abanikanda is definitely, he's the more fun guy to draft for sure.
And in best ball, I'm really into him. And in managed leagues, like he's harder. He's a harder sell for me to really get excited about. But I think the way Abanikanda plays and his speed and the way he can just break through and just be gone. Would you be shocked if he had 2 or 3 70-yard touchdown runs, or not 70, 40, 50, 60? I mean, it's possible. There's few guys in the league that can do it quite like he can.
And I think that's the thing. It's like that breakaway ability, man. A lot of times once these guys flash it, we get so excited, and sometimes that bleeds over to the coaching staff as well, and they start giving them more opportunities. A couple of tight end questions here for you. FFPC tight end premium leagues, Dalton Kincaid is up to tight end 11 at the 904. He is a rookie tight end going in the first 9 rounds, and he is going right off the board after the top 10 tight ends are off. Is that too high? Are people getting crazy on Kincaid?
Yeah, that's I mean, tight end is kind of a wasteland, so I guess it's fine. But like that one's hard. We have him down at 16. Once again, they're out of Rochester.
Dialed into the Bills. Yep, absolutely.
They're tough. I mean, but they also once you start getting past, let's say, George Kittle, like the tight end, that's kind of the George Kittle line is arbitrary. Cut it. You can take a shot on any of them and have an argument. It's all about the price. So yeah, you said he's tight end 11, but where is that going, and who's going around him?
Well, that's the thing. It's so you're looking at Goddard and Waller after the top 5 are off the board. Goddard and Waller are going basically back to back in the mid 5th. Then you have Engram in the mid 7th. Then you have Freiermuth at the end of the 7th, and Njoku mid 8th, and then Chigakonkwo and Kincaid are going back to back in the mid 9th at that point. And then Dalton Schultz not until the early 10th.
Yeah. See, I might take Kincaid over Okonkwo.
Mm-hmm. I would. I mean, just from the upside. Like I just at that point I'm like looking like, okay, who's more likely to have a top 5 season? Well, it's Kincaid, clearly. And if you're trying to beat thousands of other teams, that's where it's at. Yeah. Last tight end question I have here for you. Who has the better 2023 season? Michael Mayer in Las Vegas or Sam Laporta in Detroit, Alex?
I'm a Laporta guy. I am hard into Laporta. I think he's really interesting. I think the way they're going to use him. I think Goff is a better quarterback than Jimmy G. If Jimmy G is the one playing, that whole offense. I mean, they could be playing for the number 1 pick really quickly. Like, I mean, that's one that could just be a dumpster fire. And I think Laporta is ready to get out there and catch some passes. I'm excited for him. I have a lot of him in best ball so far. And I think he's going cheaper than Mayer, isn't he? He's later.
Right. Yeah, I think he is. I'm going to look it up right now. Laporta is tight end 17 at the 1107. And Michael Mayer is actually going behind him. So Michael Mayer, tight end 22 at the 1407. But when that flipped when the Lions made him the second tight end off the board, and then Mayer didn't go on the first day. So obviously that's when we saw the change. All right, final question for you, Mr. @PeakedInHS_FF. Best way to consume more of your content? Obviously, Draft Sharks. What other venues should we be checking out?
Yeah, definitely follow me on Twitter. I tweet mostly about fantasy football and then air fryer recipes.
I noticed that too. Good for you. Good for you.
I did bananas today. They were pretty good.
Oh,
yeah,
excellent.
Banana chips, little cinnamon.
Yes.
Very active on Reddit. The Dynasty subreddit. There's a lot of good content there. Some monsters, some animals, but I mean it's Reddit. Same thing with fantasy football.
Yeah.
And then you can also find some of my other work on peakedinhighschool.com. That's where I do my market-based trade value charts. There's pros and cons of any of them. It's really use as many tools as you can to make educated decisions, but you can find a lot of really cool stuff on DraftSharks.
Now, peakedinhighschool.com, is it SKOOL? Okay,
Yeah.
that's just want to make sure. So peakedinhighschool.com, school with the K. And make sure you're following Alex on Twitter at peakedinHS_FF. Okay, before we get out of here, a couple of housekeeping things I want to clean up here. Number one, thanks to Alex Korff and our producer, Anthony Rivera. Number two, register for the inaugural Fantasy Pros Championship, just $350 to get in on that at myffpc.com. $1 million grand prize is available. You register by June 15th. You have 1 week left. You register by then and then draft your team by the June 30th deadline. You're going to get a free $35 FFPC team credit. If you do that up to 3 times, you will get 3 credits. That's over $100 worth of teams. Make sure you're signing up for that and doing that. We talked a lot, did Alex and I, about Dynasty startup analysis, Dynasty trade value charts we got into. Register for Dynasty startup drafts right now at myffpc.com. They start at $100. They go up to a $5,000 entry. Dynasty has been going on for a decade plus at the FFPC, or I should say almost a decade, not quite a decade plus yet. At myffpc.com, all those leagues are still in existence. None have ever folded. The main event, the FFPC main event, is awarding a $1 million grand prize. Obviously, the guys who won it last year, the Go Bills, the Marv Levy, Don Baranye, Nick Costantino, and Sean Stutzman, they will try to go back to back to back as they became the first FFPC millionaires last year. You can take them down this year when you sign up at myffpc.com. 2 best ball tournaments we have going on. The FFPC Best Ball Tournament, $125 to get in, $200,000 grand prize. The Superflex Best Ball Tournament going on as well, $35 to get into that, and you can win $50,000 grand prize. We also have plenty of closed 12-team leagues there. If you don't want to join the national tournaments, you just want to get your feet wet, go to myffpc.com. Put $5 in your account, and you can draft the best ball team there for just $5. We have a ton of options there, and those best ball prices go all the way up to, I believe, $1,250 as well. No, $2,500 as well. We will check out everything that Alex Korff is producing at DraftSharks.com. Thank you so much, my friend. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Next week, 33rd teams, Kevin Wheeler, 7 o'clock. Don't miss it on the Better Sports Network. Garrett Price and the Dynasty Nerds are up next.